Hi, it's George from Any Old Music. I've not watched many of the Twilight Zone episodes, not for a lack of wanting to, but simply a lack of paired reason and opportunity. What better way then to introduce myself to these highly regarded television classics than by doing so through a composer whom I hugely admire, Bernard Herrmann. In this video I want to look at Herrmann's score for the 5th episode of the Twilight Zone, the first season, Walking Distance, which aired on the 30th of October 1959. The production of the score occurred a few months prior, on the 15th of August. I'll generally be keeping comments and analysis away from perceptions of the music's relationship to picture and narrative, particularly in this one. Part 2 next week when I look at composition, I'll go into that a little bit. Where the Any Old Music article on which this video is based is split into 3 subsections, this video is split into 2. First is instrumentation and how significant Herrmann seems to have found the process of selecting his ensembles for a project, particularly TV projects, where his ensembles are both smaller and contain interesting combinations within those small ensembles. Secondly, we'll be looking at reorchestration, which Herrmann uses to vary and develop his musical ideas without need for complicated and possibly even distracting for the viewer melodic variation. It would be easy to skip over the instrumentation of the score for this episode, stating that it's simply a string orchestra. However, this misses the delicate consideration Herrmann makes in selecting the number of strings he needs and how he uses them. On a surface level it looks like a string orchestra or string ensemble, as we've said. However, Herrmann is very precise with the numberings. He asks for 6 first violins, 4 second violins, 3 violas, 3 celli and 2 double basses. It is a modest ensemble of strings, possibly constrained for budgetary reasons. However, even so, why this particular ensemble? It is larger, if not in sections, but in terms of the number of musicians used, than other ensembles that Bernard Herrmann put together for other episodes of the Twilight Zone, which can be seen on the table on screen now. The care and oddity of Herrmann's ensembles communicate an underlying value that Herrmann places on instrumentation, while they undoubtedly allow experimentation and creative constraint, which have value to the process of composition creatively and also developing as a composer. Herrmann's precision imbues each episode with a musical fingerprint. Doing this with anything else, such as melody or harmony, particularly in the short anthology episodic format that the Twilight Zone is in, would be much more challenging. We hear instrumentation immediately, whereas establishing harmonic and melodic elements takes more time across a narrative. In a sense, deliberate or not, Herrmann creates an episodic individuality with greater ease through his use of instrumentation in this way. The melodic and harmonic character can then take care of itself on much more musical and narrative terms. What I mean by this is, due to the distinctive instrumentation, Herrmann only needs to think about melody and harmony as they relate to wider conventions expected by viewers of the Twilight Zone. What I mean by this is, due to the distinctive instrumentation, Herrmann only needs to think about melody and harmony as they relate to wider conventions expected by the viewer of the Twilight Zone. Furthermore, the less standard combinations of timbres add to those conventions of the unexpected, supernatural and suspenseful. They also impose idiosyncrasies and numeric limitations that will undoubtedly affect harmony and melody, further exacerbating their individuality. Somewhat ironically, one can easily forget that a professional artist earns their livelihood through their art. To do this, much like any job, it takes time and effort to make those pennies. However, for the freelancer, the earning of those pennies is not a traditional exchange of time for money. Instead, there is an exchange of artifact for money. In other words, in this instance, music is composed and produced by a composer for a fee. Therefore, the time spent working on the music is depreciating the money earned from that fee. Furthermore, there is always an opportunity cost at play as well. If the composer is working on one project, that means they are unable to work on another, unless, in the rare instance, a project wants them enough to wait, and thus their earning potential is reduced as well by the loss of opportunity if they're taken up on a pre-existing gig. Now, this is not to say artists are only in it for the money, quite the opposite is the truth. However, unsurprisingly, the professional composer, if they are to be sustainably professional, has to come up with crafty ways to make composing and producing effective music more efficiently, or as efficiently as they can. Herrmann, an absolute professional, has many of these tricks up his sleeve. I want to explore one crafty way here, the use of orchestration to extend and refresh a musical idea. Herrmann uses orchestration at several points to give his musical ideas greater longevity. One notable location is in the fifth cue, the house. At the 2 points that the music switches to 3/4 time, Herrmann uses a similar idea. In the first instance, the orchestration is a solo cello with a harp that rolls crotchet length chords as an accompaniment. However, in the second instance, which has slightly different harmonies unless I've misread the handwritten score lines, the melody line is given to the 3 violas and the accompaniment is provided by divisi violins, first and seconds. Straightforward reorchestration, Herrmann is not only giving the cue a consistent musical idea, but is also not having to reinvent the wheel either. In addition to changing the orchestration, making those instrumentation changes, Herrmann also instructs different dynamic levels. Wistful, in the first instance, the cello and harp play an amicable and delicate piano dynamic, with the instruction dolce, which is asked of the cello as well. In the reorchestrated passage, however, the violins and viola are instructed to perform fortissimo. They are then asked to decrescendo in the last few bars of their parts. Herrmann chooses to divisi the first violin so that they are playing in octaves on the outer voices, which enclose the divisi second violins between them, which fill out the chord tones of the harmony. I found this a significant change, as an octave doubling and increased numbers would give this line further prominence. These changes, the use of the violins as opposed to harp, and the dynamic levels create a stark contrast. In the first instance, the difference between plucked and bowed strings brings clarity of texture and instrumental roles. The cello is the melody, the harp is the accompaniment. However, there is a tension in the reorchestration, exacerbated by the increased dynamic level and homogeneity between the instruments, violins and violas. This creates a kind of tension. The parts are sort of recontextualised as being a little more contrapuntal, with the chordal accompaniments, outer voices, the octaves, being elevated to a kind of status of counter melody. The two parts now fight for our attention, rather than having the harp set behind the cello in the previous orchestration. The second reorchestration example that I want to look at is the brief chaconne style idea that Herrmann uses twice in the last couple of cues, number 9, Martin's Summer, and number 10, Elegy, two of the longest cues within this episode as it happens. Split into 2 parts, the similarity of the A and B portions of the idea are very similar, using subtle changes to the harmony and bass. Each idea is used twice with little change to the harmony and the bass line. The highest line, not so much a melody as opposed to a harmonic choice, does not change at all. Instead, Herrmann creates variation through orchestration, using distinctions of solo, divisi, different string instruments, bowing, which alters the texture, and register. To demonstrate these changes, I've created a table highlighting each idea with a description of its orchestration. In Martin's Summer, part A1 on the table, the sound is one of the string orchestras, with each part having at least 2 players on each line. It is the most distinctive variant in my opinion, as it uses a détaché bowing that alters the perception of the music's texture. Rather than feeling contrapuntal, it feels more homophonic as the strings move together. It's impressive just how much a simple change like that alters the feeling of the music so extensively. To me, the setting comes across as more reverential than A2, which is more emotional. The emotional quality of A2 likely comes from the use of high violins, moving with more independence than the détaché A1 idea. Each violin, at least for the first 3 bars, will be on its shimmering E string, restrained by mutes and piano marking. It is retrospective in character as opposed to overflowing. The two B ideas are varied by the juxtaposition of section and solo qualities. In B1, most of the lines have a handful of players on them. Only one inner line has just 2 players, whereas every line in B2, including the pedal, has 1 player, a soloist. I've discussed the concept of juxtaposing solo and section colours before, only recently as well, with greater detail than I can do here. In brief, it's a subtle variance of presence and weight. I'll link the relevant articles below, and probably above actually, in the top left corner, where I discuss this concept concerning other pieces. Herrmann demonstrates a range of ways we can use orchestration to bring our pieces to life. One of these lessons is to be selective about instrumentation. Ironically, when a lot of us have unbelievable control over the music we create as composer-producers, we brush over the important decision of instrumentation. We seem to default to standard setups, be it templates we've created or historical norms. Another lesson is that we should think more deeply about the sounds we want and how they relate to the sounds and feelings we are trying to create. I liken the fortissimo concertino string sound to shouting in a coffin. It is haunting. We can feel the players are playing loudly, even aggressively, but their sound is restricted. How might this make the audience feel? Or, how might a different sound like flautando or saltasto make the audience feel? Lastly, we've seen how orchestration is not only vital in bringing our music to life, but useful too. A crafty skill. Rather than rewrite material or try and come up with a melodic development when it might not be needed, using different colours is a great way of extending and refreshing our ideas without having to reinvent the wheel.